our problem solving section using programming, which is section 11, and the first part is conditional statements. You can find this question workbook in the course resources attached to this section. So I would prefer it if you could download it right now and have it in front of you so that you can take a look at the questions while you code along with me. So let's get into it. Now, the first question says, positions on a chessboard are identified by a letter and a number. The letter identifies the column while the number identifies the row as shown below. So we can see that here our letter is identified by, our column is identified by letters and our rows are identified by numbers. That's pretty simple. Now, the question says, write a program that reads a position from the user. Use an if statement to determine if the column begins with a black square or a white square. Then use modular arithmetic to report the color of the square in that row. For example, if the user enters A1, then your program should report that the square is black. If the user enters D5, then your program should report that the square is white. What does this mean? So if the user enters A and 1, this means that the square right here is black. And if the user enters D and 5, we can see that from D, if we go to the fifth row, and from the fifth row, if we go to the fifth column, to the fourth column, we have a white square. So that's pretty simple to understand. The final part of this question says that your program may assume that a valid position will always be entered. It does not need to perform any error checking. Great. So our program doesn't really need to worry about what kind of an input the user is going to give, if the input's valid or invalid, because we're assuming that the user will always enter a valid input. Now remember, that's not an ideal case scenario. That does not happen in real life. So when you usually write problems, you'll have to do a lot of error checking. But just for question's sake, we won't be doing any error checking in this question. And well, we'll be following the question. So now the next step is to understand a pattern within how are we going to code this out. So whenever you approach a programming problem or a coding problem, you should look for patterns in that problem which you could basically code out easily. In this case, a very simple pattern that we see which will help us determine which square is black or which position has a black square or which position has a white square. The pattern that we see here is that whenever a number is odd, which in this case is 1, and the alphabet is at an odd position, which in this case is the first position here, that is A, we have a black square. While when a number is even and the alphabet is odd, which is C, that is 3, we have a white square. So for every even number and even alphabet, or odd number and odd alphabet, we have a black square. And for every even number and odd alphabet, or odd number and even alphabet, we have a white square. Perfect. So that is our logic. But then it's very easy for us to determine which number is even or odd. But how are we going to say which alphabet is even or odd? That's a little tricky, right? Except that it's not. We've just learned the concept of dictionaries. So let's create a dictionary which has these alphabets as keys, and their values could be 1 for A, 2 for B, 3 for C, 4 for D, and so on for E, F, G, and H. So the first step would be to take user input where the user enters the position. So step 1 would be take user input. So in this case, since the user is going to enter a position, let's call the variable position and make that equal to an input, which says kindly enter a position on the chessboard. Pretty simple. Now, the next step is to, well, create this dictionary. So Step 2, create alphabet dictionary. So let's call this ALPHADICT, alpha dictionary. And this dictionary is going to have keys A and B, C, D, E, F, G, and finally H. Now, each key needs a value, so A is going to be 1, B is going to be 2, C is going to be 3, D is going to be 4, E is going to be 5, F is going to be 6, G is going to be 7, and H is going to be 8. Awesome. Now that this is done, let's move on and start building our logic. So first off, we need to determine if the alphabet is an even or odd alphabet and the number is an even or odd number. So when the user enters the position, let's write if else to determine if the alphabet is an even alphabet and if the number is an even number or, well, odd number. So let's create two new variables, which is letter to store the alphabet and number to store the number. Now, if we look at our user input is going to look something like this. When I run this code, if the user enters A1, this is what our user input looks like. So the alphabet or the letter is at position 0 in the string and the number is at position 1 in the string. So naturally, these variables will be populated with position at 0 and position at 1. Pretty simple, right? So if I print, letter and letter, and I print number and number, and run this again, type a position, which is A1. It says the letter is A and the number is 1. Perfect. So we've got a letter and number sliced out. Now, the next thing that we want to do is we want to check if the letter is even or odd and the number is even or odd. So for the letter, what we'll do is we'll use our dictionary. So if alphadict at letter mod 2 equals 0. So if the letter is A, then 1 mod 2 is not equal to 0, right? So it's odd, right? Then print even letter, else print odd letter. Let's check if this works. So if we write A1, it prints odd because A is 1 and, well, that is odd. At the same time, if I type H, which is even, oh, it says there's some problem. It says string index out of range. Why does it say so? It says number at position 1. That is because, well, our input was not entered properly. Let's run this again. It says, let's write H1 and press enter. Now it says even because H pertains to 8 or is associated with the value 8, and so the answer is even, and therefore alphadict at letter mod 2 equals 0. This condition is true and therefore it prints even. Awesome. Let's see if we can tell if our number is even or odd. So if number mod 2 equals 0, print even, number, else print odd number. Now, before running this program, I want you to take a step back and check this code out. Do you think this code will work? If so, try to explain to yourself why this code would work. And if not, try to explain to yourself why it wouldn't work. Well, I know it's not going to work. And that is because, let me just run this and show that to you. So if I type A1 as the position, as expected, the code breaks. It says type error. Not all arguments are converted during string formatting. And it says that the error is on line 19. So line 19 here is this one. That is because a number is still of the type string because we've simply taken it from our input and well sliced it here. So what we need to do is we need an int typecast on our number, and now it should work perfectly. So if I type A1, it says our letter is odd and our number is also odd because 1 is odd. So let me just type letter here and letter so that we have a better output. And if I write H8, it says our letter is even because H has the value 8, and well, 8 is obviously even, so it says that it's an even number. Now let's build our logic. So to build the logic here, we need to first determine all black squares. So all black squares would be even, even, and odd, odd combination. So even number, even letter, odd number, and odd letter. Now here, building the logic. Here to build the logic, first let's write our if statement. So if our letter is even and our number is also even, then what is it? So if the letter is even and the number is even, then it is a black square. And if a letter is odd and a number is odd, then it is a black square again. So print black square. Now this only works if our letter and number are even. But what when our letter and number both are odd? Well, we could simply use the OR operator, and we could write OR the same condition, and we just negate it, or not both of these are well not even, right? So that means they're odd. So let's see if that works out. Our position, we could write A, which is an odd alphabet, and 1, which is an odd number. It says black square. Let's try it with some other one. Let's try to even, which should be B4. That is a black square. So let's check B4. So we got B and we got 4, which is a black square. So our program works correctly for black squares. Now let's go for white squares. So when do we have white squares? We have white squares when one is even and the other is odd, or like when the letters are even and numbers are odd, or when the letters are odd and numbers are even. So for that, we write simply if the letter is even and the number is odd. So if this is true and this is not equal to 0. So if number mod 2 is not equal to 0, so if the letter is even and the number is odd, or the letter is odd, which is this mod 2 is not equal to 0, and the number is even, then it is a white square. So let's just remove all of this code. We don't need it anymore and test our program finally. Now when I run my code, it says kindly enter a position on the chessboard. Let's take the positions that were given to us in the question, that is A1 and D5. So A1 is supposed to be a black square and D5 is supposed to be a white square. So A1, that's a black square, perfect. If I run this and write D5, well, that's a white square, perfect. But now in this case, why does this print black square and white square? That is a big question, and that is a very, very good question. Let's try that again. D5, and well, it prints both. That means that both of these conditions hold true for D5. That is a big issue. So why must this be happening? So D is, well, an even alphabet and 5 is an odd number. So this condition is true. So D is even, so alphabet is even, but number is not even. Now in this case, alphabet is even and number is again not even. So this is false. And then when you negate this, this becomes true. So D5, for this particular situation, both of these conditions hold true. And therefore, we need to change this condition right here to the specific if-else condition. In this case, for a black square, that would be the alphabet is odd and the number is also odd. So now when I run this, D5 should simply print white square, which is, well, the right answer. Let's take up two more random samples from our squares. So let's take G7 and H8. So let me run this. So you've got G7, it says black square. Let's check that. So you've got G and 7, which is a black square. And then the final one is H8, which is again a black square. So H and 8 is a black square. Just to check it out, let's try H7. So we run that, H7, that's a white square, and we can see that H7 indeed is a white square right here. Awesome. So our program works perfectly and gives us the right output. Now there are actually many ways and better ways and more efficient ways to do this program. If you're able to find out those ways, put them down in the comments so all of us can actually take a look at what your methodology or your logic is to solve this particular problem, and I'll be more than happy if someone finds a better way to do this and posts it on our forum in the comment section. Until then, if you've got any questions, you can always post them in the comment section and myself or my team will get back to you ASAP with the best solution possible for your question. And well, have fun and I'll see you in the next one.